Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name's Rob, and today I'll be your host. And today we are going to be talking about another UFO case very soon. But before I get into that, I have some important business to address. Is a question that came in from a listener. He's a follower on Instagram. His name is Dan. He sent me a question that he wants to know the answer to. He says that this will determine whether or not he continues listening to the podcast. So Dan wants to know, Rob, are you a coffee or a tea man? Your answer will decide whether I keep listening. So Dan, I hopefully give you the answer you're looking for, but I drink more coffee than I would tea. I am a coffee fiend. I would drink a lot of coffee every day. However, I do love a good cup of tea. You know, sometimes you just need a cup of tea. It's an important thing to have, and you know, it can never be replaced by coffee in that sense. You know, anyone that's listening who drinks tea, you know what I'm talking about. You just need a cup of tea every once in a while, and it has a special place in my heart. So Dan, I hope that that answers your question and that you continue to listen to us. I'm totally aware, a very clear politician's answer. I've given you both as an option. So ball's in your court, Dan. hopefully you can accept that as an answer. But yeah. Apart from that, I hope everyone is well. And as I said at the start, we will be talking about another UFO case today. Something that's actually very interesting. This case today is allegedly the first use of the term flying saucer ever used in popular media. And that's actually what caught my eye. So yeah, we're going to dive into it and see where it takes us. So today's story takes place on the 24th of June, 1947. A man called Kenneth Arnold was flying his plane from Chehalis, Washington to Yakima, Washington in the Pacific Northwest. He was flying a Call Air A2, which is a type of small plane. It looks like a kind of a two-seater, kind of small prop plane. The kind of typical sort of 1940s plane you can think of. That's basically it. And he was flying along. He was on a business trip, as you do back in the 40s. The man was flying to work, basically. And while he was flying on his route, he decided to make a detour because he heard over the radio that there was allegedly a $5,000 reward, which I checked, it's equivalent to about $70,000 today, for the discovery of a US Marine Corps C-46 transport airplane that had crashed near Mount Rainier. So Kenneth Arnold, obviously deciding that he wanted this reward, as most people would, decided, you know what, I'll fly around my plane, see if I can find it. And, he was obviously feeling optimistic about it because the skies this day were allegedly completely clear and there was a very mild wind. So they're like perfect plane spotting weather, I'm sure. So this happens around 2:15 to around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, you know, it's a pretty bright day. It's in the middle of summer. So this is ideal conditions for what he's trying to do. So a few minutes before 3 o'clock, Arnold was flying about in his plane. He was approximately around 3,000 meters, I think, which is about 9,500 feet in freedom units. So he's flying around, and he was near a place called Mineral in Washington, and decided, you know what, I'm not going to find this plane, this downed plane. I've looked around a bit, it's not here. So in total, he was probably looking for about 30 minutes. So he decides, going to fly in towards Yakima, and that's it. As he's flying along, he sees a flashing light similar to what he describes as sunlight reflecting from his mirror. So he panicked initially because he thought that he was actually beside another aircraft and he had somehow managed to miss this. He quickly looked around, couldn't see anything, and then got on the radio to ground radar, tried to see what the crack was, and they told him that there was a plane near him, but it was 15 miles away, a DC-4, which is basically like an airliner. It's kind of some World War II plane that was turned into kind of a passenger plane. Picture Indiana Jones, where he's like traveling across the like Pacific, that sort of plane. One of those was flying about 15 miles, 25 kilometers away. So he verifies that that's off there, but this is not what he saw. So about 30 seconds after seeing the first flash of light, he proceeds then to see a series of bright flashes in the distance off to his left, or as he clarified afterwards, it's north of Mount Rainier. So he's approximately 20 to 25 miles or about 40 kilometers away from Mount Rainier. So being an experienced pilot that he had over 9,000 hours flight time at this point. So like the dude knew what he was doing. He was also a search and rescue pilot. So like very experienced guy. He goes through the kind of the motions of trying to figure out what it is. So initially he figures this could be reflections from my airplane's windows. So he does a few tests. He decides to rock the airplane from side to side, obviously seeing if the reflections move or not. Then that tells him straight away. He took off his sunglasses, rolled down his side window, all this sort of stuff. So he's kind of going through all the steps, trying to rule it out, and the reflections are still there. So he determines after doing all these checks that the reflections must be coming from flying objects. So as they kind of appear closer, Arnold decides that these are actually flying in what he describes as a long chain. And he initially thinks maybe they're geese because they're flying in that kind of formation. But then he quickly decides, no, this can't be the case. They're flying way too high. They're like glinting in the sky, which obviously geese don't do. And they were moving at quite a fast speed. So then he kind of goes, maybe it's just a new type of jet, and starts looking basically to see if he can kind of identify the jet by its tail, or any sort of like identifying markers on it. But as he's looking, he realizes that he actually can't see any tail at all on it. So as he's flying along, these objects are coming closer. They are approaching Mount Rainier, so they're getting closer towards him as well. They pass in front of Mount Rainier, and the thing that stands out to him is these objects are now dark in front of the snow that's on top of the mountain. So he kind of verifies that these are actual material objects that are flying between the two. And he says that they're kind of like moving in the air, like kind of flipping erratically is the way he described it. And that at a certain angle, they appeared so thin or flat that they looked almost invisible to him. So I'm kind of imagining, if you like look at a piece of paper off to the side, if you get it at just the right angle, you can barely see it. That seems to be kind of what he's describing here. Obviously not as thin as a piece of paper. So yeah, he says that they were these convex shapes basically. Yeah, convex, or as he said, or crescent shaped. So, they're kind of, I suppose, similar enough in shape. So yeah, he basically, he doesn't really know what they are. And he decides to try to guess their size by using the engine cover on the plane as he's flying. So basically like effectively what's like the bonnet for the engine on the plane. He knows the size of that. And he decides, based on the distance that they are from him, he can roughly estimate the size of the objects based off the information that he has. So he decides to basically do some rough calculations and figures out that they're approximately 30 meters in length or 100 feet, which is quite a bit bigger than the other plane that was in the area at the time. So he kind of rules out that is one of those kind of planes. Later on in time, further estimates put it at closer to 85 meters or 280 feet, which is a significantly bigger piece of equipment. So he says that the objects were flying in this echelon formation, so basically like a diagonal line basically flying along. And he estimates that they were stretched out over a distance of approximately 5-ish miles. So like 7-8 kilometers. And that they were moving basically on this kind of level horizontal plane. So kind of just keeping a steady altitude and moving at speed. He says that they were kind of weaving from side to side like the tail on a kite, which is actually a really cool image. I love that. And he says that they were basically like darting through the areas of the valleys and near like mountain peaks and stuff like that. He says that they would occasionally then flip or bank on their edges in unison. So the cool thing about this is that they're kind of moving in this kind of cohesive manner, that when they're flipping, they're all flipping. When they're kind of waving like that kite tail, they're all doing it in unison. So just really, really cool image. So Arnold basically trying to be as, I suppose, realistic about this as anyone else. He just decides that he has seen basically test flights of a new US military aircraft and kind of tries to put it out of his mind. So as he's kind of flying his plane kind of going more southward, he pulls his plane kind of going on like a parallel course beside these craft. And it was at this point that he actually opened his side window and began observing the objects kind of without glass in the way, effectively. And he says that, yeah, the objects just continued moving forward of his position. He ruled out then that they were reflections of any kind because his window was down. And yeah, they keep basically moving away. He says that they just moved off at a steady speed, and he estimates that based on the speed that they were moving at, the time that he saw them, and the direction that they were going in, that the speed was in excess of 1,700 miles per hour. That's, or like, what, nearly 3,000 kilometers an hour. So this, at the time, was faster than any manned aircraft in 1947. So yeah, he basically says, like, he didn't know what was going on here. And that was kind of it. So when Arnold landed in Yakima, he described what he'd seen to a number of pilots, some friends and everything, and they suggested that he might have maybe seen some like new guided missiles or something like that, or like some secret airplane. And he kind of agrees with them, and he's like, yeah, you know what, probably. So he refuels and he continues on his way to his ultimate destination, which was in Pendleton in Oregon. And that was kind of it. So obviously with him kind of sharing his story, the media obviously got a hold of it, and he was interviewed by reporters the next day on June 25th. And the interesting thing about this is that, as I said at the start, this guy is actually a very reliable witness. He's a very experienced pilot, and the details that he gives are very just factual. There's nothing sensational about them. He's just being very clear in what he saw and isn't kind of exaggerating any further. And even Arnold himself, when he was kind of approached by another reporter, he actually said, this whole thing has gotten out of hand. I want to talk to the FBI or someone. Half the people look at me as a combination of Einstein, Flash Gordon, and a screwball. I wonder what my wife back in Idaho thinks. So yeah, this dude, he doesn't want this attention. He just reported seeing something in the sky, and that seemingly is kind of all he wanted to do. He wasn't interested in the attention at all. So just to kind of close out the story then, as a means of, I suppose, legitimizing what he'd seen, there were actually other sightings of these objects around the same time, or similar objects anyway. So the Portland, Oregon Journal reported on the 4th of July, so, you know, not that much longer after this, like a week and a half, that they got a letter from a man in Washington, approximately 120 odd miles away. And he says that he saw 3 strange objects flying almost edgewise toward the Mount Rainier about an hour and a half before Arnold reported seeing his craft. And he says that the aircraft were larger than anything he'd seen before. They were flying in formation and they were traveling at high speed. And the letter goes on to say, I've seen P-38 aircraft seemingly appear on one horizon and then gone on the opposite horizon in no time at all. I'm telling you, these discs were certainly traveling faster than any P-38. So that's kind of one letter. And then the person did go on to say, I believe it may be a visitor from another planet, which, you know, probably didn't help the case. And then in Yakima in Washington, a woman approached the media, Ethel Wheelhouse, and she reported seeing several flying discs moving at incredible speeds around the time of Arnold's sighting. Military intelligence actually got involved in this. They found another witness in the area who was a member of the Washington State Forest Service. They were actually on fire watch in a tower about 20 miles south of Yakima at the time, and they reported seeing flashes in the sky at approximately 3 p.m. So right around the time that Arnold's sighting was taking place. And they said that the flashes appeared to move in a straight line and were in formation. And then similarly enough, another person came forward with the exact same story, reporting 9 shiny discs flying to the north in the same area. And then finally then, the last 2 kind of sightings, a Seattle newspaper reported multiple witnesses coming forward saying that there were sightings of flashing, rapidly unknown moving objects, kind of around the same time as Arnold's sighting, kind of, I suppose, lending credence to the idea that they were moving through the sky, so they're seen at different places at different times. And then I suppose the most legitimate sighting then was a United Airlines crew who were flying over Idaho on the way to Seattle. They reported seeing what they described as approximately 5 to 9 disc-like objects that kept pace with their plane for about 10 minutes before suddenly disappearing off in the direction that Arnold had been. So that kind of concludes the story. Like, there's loads of speculation after that, what people talk about, all this sort of stuff, you know, what it is, what they think it is. But, you know, it kind of, the thing that interests me the most about this is that the Chicago Sun, when reporting on this on the 26th of June 1947, their headline says, "Supersonic flying saucers sighted by Idaho pilot." And that's what I love about this, is that it seems to be the first use ever of the term flying saucer, and created this whole new way of describing these UFOs that are still used today, and basically became one of the most popular ways of describing these sightings going forward. And I just find that really cool, that this seemingly just kind of bizarre sighting, but also like quite like anticlimactic in a sense, like he's seen them off in the distance but nothing else kind of happens. It spawned this new saying that everyone now knows and still uses today. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I would love to hear what you think about this, what you think these are. I personally don't really know. I think it maybe could be some sort of experimental aircraft. I'm not sure. It does seem to be that they are traveling at some serious speeds, but I do love the idea that you have these UFOs, whether they be alien in origin, human, whatever, flying in this kind of formation, zipping in and out, kind of pivoting, turning on axis and all, and just looking really cool. I think it's just a really cool image. But yeah, as I said, I'd love to hear from you on this. You can get us at Instagram at the SpookyAFPod. You can get us on Gmail at the SpookyAFPodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your theories on this. Or if you have any other questions about my preferences for tea or coffee or anything else, or any questions you might have for Suze, you can reach out to us as well. But with that, I hope you're having a great day whenever it is that you're listening to this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.